Welcome back to the Birdcage. Today we will be previewing, recapping the Kansas Michigan State Champions Classic game that took place on Tuesday. I'm Jack Kenna, joined alongside James Madden. James, how are you doing today?
Not too bad. I mean, like you said, we hit where it depends on what kind of basketball you like. We could say it was a good game because it was a competitive game, but maybe for the wrong reasons in Atlanta
Yeah,
on Tuesday. But nonetheless, KU got out with a win and improved to 3-0 as they get ready for Oakland this weekend.
yeah. In terms of sloppiness, it wasn't the most sloppy game. It was just disgusting basketball. Nobody could make a shot on Tuesday. Um, Kansas struggled from the field. And the reason why they won is because Michigan State struggled more. That it was not a very good game, was it?
No, and like you said, it was a lot of missed shots, especially in the first half. I think the second half was much better
Hmm.
tempo, rhythm, and even in the second half, it wasn't that great. I think the only guy that really played well and was consistent all night long was Hunter Dickinson, who we
Yeah,
were
of
just talking about had, as Hunter Dickinson always is, he's always in the limelight when it comes to college basketball media because
course
he
he
always
is.
will let you, he'll always let you know he got a big bucket. And it was against his former rival of Michigan State, obviously being a Michigan guy.
I
But I
wouldn't
think the
even say former rival. I think he still hates.
that's true. I mean, I don't know. He's not even a Michigan kid. I think he's from like Arlington, Virginia. So it's not like it's a childhood rivalry, but whatever. But I think the concerning thing for Michigan State was Jaden Akins really couldn't hit anything.
Yeah,
Akins has been, I think he's a senior now. He's been there his whole career. And we talk about Dewan and KJ about how they've been at KU for a long time. Jaden Akins is another guy in a, you know, college basketball landscape where you don't stay at the same school for a very long time. He's stayed in East Lansing for his whole career, and he'll be their guy this year. I mean, I'm not too concerned about him as a player, but he really didn't look great offensively against KU. And
mhm.
on nights where Jaden Akins can't find, the bottom of the bucket, Michigan State being very young and inexperienced, their guy is going to be Jaden Akins. And when he can't hit shots, it's going to be very tough for them to win, especially against a team like Kansas.
It was really kind of sad. I mean, you just touched on Jaden Akins, but Tom Izzo in the press game conference or the post game conference was really upset for Jaden Akins, not at Jaden Akins, but for him. Said that he puts in so much work and how you would want Jaden Akins to be your son's best friend. You would want him to date your daughter and just how great of a guy he is. And it's really upsetting because Izzo knows how hard he works, but it's just kind of not showing right now. So honestly, I was sitting in the room and I was kind of sad. Like he really did struggle against Kansas, but everyone on the court struggled unless your name's Hunter Dickinson. It wasn't a good game for Michigan State, especially. You got absolutely nothing from Xavier Booker. You got very little from Jeremy Fears. Um, I mean, Frankie Fiddler had to have 15 points, and even the shots that he took were a little skeptical at
He had
points.
a weird 15 too. Like the
It
first half,
was,
I thought
yeah.
he looked kind of off. Like he looked like a guy who was very new to that system, as he is. But
Yeah.
even Fiddler, as like you said, he had 15. It was a weird 15, I think, for
It
him.
was a weird 15 because you never felt like Frankie Fiddler was hot, if that makes sense. He had a few really interesting shots that were I assume that he thought he was going to get a foul called, and then he would kind of push something up and no whistle. So almost turnovers, pretty
It
much.
was a physical game. Like I think the
Yeah,
refs let him play a lot as well.
they sure did, but it was like I remember watching Frankie Fiddler, and you're kind of watching the game, and you're just like, he doesn't look very good. And then you look up at the scoreboard, and he's leading Michigan State in all scoring, which is crazy. Um, I I think Michigan State's two best players actually came off the bench for them. I mean, Jackson Kohler played pretty good in his time. I mean, Michigan State couldn't stop fouling Hunter Dickinson, but I think Jackson Kohler played really good, and then Jace Richardson, son of Jason Richardson, Michigan basketball player. So funny enough that he's at State, but Jace Richardson played pretty good. What do you think about Michigan State's just kind of struggles early in this game?
Yeah, and like you said, Jackson Kohler, he gave them some really good minutes early on because Xavier Booker, as good as Booker is, he really struggled with the size. And Booker's a big guy. Like he's a 6'11", 7-footer.
Yeah.
But I think Hunter Dickinson is obviously a lot more solid than Booker. So
Yeah.
Booker really struggled with the size of
Uh-huh.
Dickinson. In Kohler, I think there was a point, I'm sure, as you know, you were at the arena in the first half where Michigan State had a lot of the momentum. And those
Oh
were the
yeah.
minutes guys like Richardson came in, Kohler, and even I thought Carson Cooper gave them some solid minutes off the bench
Yeah.
too. And there was in the first half, I wouldn't say there's panic because it never really, it was a very close game throughout, but there were many, stretches where Michigan State had a lot of momentum. That's because of that bench unit.
Hmm.
But as good as guys like Kohler and Richardson are and will be all season long, you don't, I hate to say you don't want to rely on the bench because any coach will tell you to win a championship, you need a good bench, but you really need a guy like Xavier Booker, who's going to be your starting center, to be able to guard guys like Hunter Dickinson because there are some dang good centers in college basketball. And, Hunter Dickinson's one of the best. You're not going to see many Hunter Dickinsons, but
Yeah.
if you want to win a championship, you have to guard Hunter Dickinson. And one more thing about Dickinson was that I think they were afraid to, because Dickinson's a really underrated passer, and
Yeah.
they were afraid to, I think, double him because last year you can get away with doubling Dickinson because KU was very sketchy shooting the ball. But
Yeah,
even
they
though
were.
Kansas didn't shoot the ball well against Michigan State, the idea of a guy like Rylan Griffin, DeJuan Harris when he's open, AJ Storr, the fact those guys can shoot the ball makes you have to give them the respect and not double off them and leave them wide open at the perimeter.
Yeah, I guess Izzo did something that I strongly believe. I'm a big advocate for one player won't beat you. So, I mean, realistically, Dickinson could have had 50, but if nobody else on that team scores or impacts the game, they win by 19. You know what I mean? So, one
Yeah.
player can't beat you. However, one player can impact a game, and that's what Dickinson did. He drew all of that, I guess, didn't draw all of that attention. Everyone else drew the attention, and they were like, we're going to let Hunter have 40 this game. They're still not going to beat us if no one else does anything. So they focused on every other player on the team, but it wasn't enough because I think that's a game that you can do if you think you can match up well. Like that's a game plan you can do if you think you match up well with the guys on the perimeter. But Michigan State starters, especially, and their guys on the perimeter just could not match up with Kansas, even though Kansas was missing everything.
Yeah, I think you said it best. I just think outside, like Dickinson is probably the best player on the floor between both
Mhm.
squads. But like you said, I don't think Michigan State is good enough to outshoot Kansas or outscore their guards because, as good as Jaden Akins is, outside of Akins, I don't know if Michigan State has another guy that can take over a game. And like I said, Akins' shots weren't falling. So that's when you say, who is that guy? And like we said, Fiddler had 15, but it was like a weird 15. You never really thought Fiddler was really getting into a rhythm. So
Mhm.
outside of, take Dickinson and Booker out of it, go 4-on-4. I think Kansas is significantly better given any of the top 7 guys in the rotation. And I think that's why they ended up winning the game is because in the second half, a guy like Rylan Griffin had some tough finishes, hit some big threes, and ended up giving KU an 8-point win.
Yeah. We talked about Michigan State's bench unit almost being as good as the starters. This game, AJ Storr came off the bench and provided not clutch shots because I don't think he went 2 for 5 from the field. He wasn't his best, but I think AJ Storr contributed off the bench. I think Flory Badunga really contributed off the bench. I think he had a really great game. 3 huge dunks, momentum shifting dunks in an arena that was mostly Michigan State, Kentucky, and Duke fans. So I feel like his buckets were pretty clutch. And then as I'm kind of going down the stat sheet, really, it was a bad game for KU.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, I think Flory had some really solid minutes, especially say towards the end of the first half. And he's very young, obviously, so we don't know. He's very raw. I think, he's super athletic. But I
Yeah.
think the most important thing with Flory all season long will be how, like, obviously staying out of foul trouble because it's important for Hunter. You can't play Hunter. In some nights, you're going to have to play him 36 minutes because that's how the game's going. But there's going to be nights you can't play Hunter, give Hunter a ton of minutes. So it's not only going to give Flory a ton of opportunities to get seen, maybe obviously he's a freshman, so who knows with the draft, but maybe next year. I think KU's really hoping he can come back next year and be the starting center. And
Yeah.
you don't really want to throw someone into the starting center role at a place like Kansas without having played real minutes. And
Mhm.
I think Flory, obviously, it's just a 3 game sample size. But I think in the first 3 games of the season, in 2 of the games being against North Carolina and Michigan State, for a kid that's never played college basketball until what, 9 days ago, I think he's done a really nice job fitting into you know, this isn't an easy place to come and play, no matter how talented you are, no matter how good you are. You can say, oh, I'm going to go play there, I'm going to go light it up. But once you start playing at Allen Fieldhouse, once you step on the floor, it's completely different. And I think Flory's handled it really well. And you could ask, I'm sure he'll continue to improve all season long. And, he could be a very important sixth man, as could, Zeke Mayo, as could Diggy Coit, AJ Store, whichever direction they go with starting lineups. Because we talked about it last week. I feel like we're going to see a million different starting lineups this year. So whoever that sixth man role is on any given night, it's going to be very important.
Yeah. There could be a lot of different lineups this year, and there were a lot of lineups in the game on Tuesday, but I really feel like that was just because nobody was shooting the ball very well. Dwan Harris didn't shoot well from the floor. Zeke Mayo, KJ Adams, Coit, Store, you name it, they didn't shoot very well. Um, and I think that's a little scary. I think that's scary because in those games where Zeke Mayo is not shooting well, we need other people around him to step up. And on Tuesday, nobody did. Everyone struggled. And I just feel like Kansas is really limited if that's what's going to happen night in, night out. I hope it's not. But that was just my takeaway from Michigan State is if this happens again against a team that can score, this is going to be a long, long year, and especially in those close games.
Yeah, you said it. I mean, I think you said it when you opened up the podcast was I think it was more so KU. Obviously, they didn't shoot the ball very well, but it's just Michigan State shot it worse.
Yeah.
And looking at the Big 12, it's going to be a very difficult conference, as it is every year. But I'd say
Uh-huh.
this year more so than we've seen in the past. I mean, it's not every year you have 5 of the top 10 preseason ranked teams in your conference. So, and every team's different, and it's a very defensive minded conference. Houston and Iowa State are 2 teams that, pride themselves in defense. But
Hmm.
even those teams, if you let them hang around. I guess I don't want to say that because Iowa State was my national championship pick, but not to hang around, but in a sense where if you're not shooting the ball well and you give them an opportunity to step on your throat, teams like them will do so. And that's why. And obviously, you can't rely on 2 players to have all American nights every night because it's just not
Yeah.
possible. And with the roster that they have, I think that they will be fine. Like I think Rylan Griffin was really big in that second half for Kansas,
He hit
and he
the
really struggled
clutchest shot of the game, according to Bill Self. So,
defensively in the first half. But I
mhm.
think he flushed it out of his mind, made some big shots, he made some tough finishes at the rim, and that's what it's all about is just next man up. And they have so many talented players that are able to do that, and hopefully guys like AJ Stork can continue to come into their own and figure it out in a Jayhawk uniform and play like the AJ Store we saw last year at Wisconsin.
Yeah, AJ Storch really struggled so far in a Kansas jersey, but he just hasn't found his rhythm yet. I expect that to change. I hope that that changes. But one player in the starting lineup that is getting a lot of heat right now is KJ Adams. Now, I don't know if you think it's deserved, undeserved, whatever kind of twist you want to put on it. KJ Adams is getting a lot of negative feedback so far this year for being in the starting lineup, saying he provides no shooting, clogs the paint up for Hunter, doesn't contribute enough on the other ends of the floor. What are your opinions about it? Because I know there's a lot of people that have varying opinions on it. So what do you think Kansas should do in terms of that four spot?
Like the thing with me for KJ is I'm like a defender of KJ, I guess. I just find him a very easy kid to root for. And like obviously there are bad games as there are for everyone. I
Hmm.
think he had a tough game against North Carolina, but I don't think he played that poorly against Michigan State because the whole team did. So why
Yeah.
single out one person besides Hunter, obviously? Why single out one guy when the other 8 guys weren't really doing that great? But I guess my question for a lot of people that are hating on KJ is where do you go in the starting lineup from there? there's, you could do four guards, but then that's, Zeke, you can't have Zeke, like no shade to Zeke Mayo, but I think you're in trouble if Zeke Mayo is your second tallest starter, right? So I think
Mhm.
KJ, and he's not that big, but he's 6'7", 6'8", but I think he plays a lot bigger than that. And
Yeah.
then you could say, oh, we can go with Flory. But then I just think I like two big lineups, but I feel like you can't overuse a two big lineup
I
because
don't think a too big lineup would work very well for KU. I
I
think
don't
it
think it
works
would
in
either.
spurts. I don't think it would work for a game.
Because I think the only way it would work for like a long period of time would be you'd have to have Hunter outside more than you'd want him, but Hunter's 7'2", so you don't want him camping at the 3-point line because he's obviously a much better shooter than Flory is, but that defeats the whole purpose of the fact he's 7'2". So
Yeah.
then the spacing would be bad if you did. And obviously, you can do two big lineups throughout the game, but in a starting lineup, I just wouldn't agree with it. So I think, if you, I like KJ as a player. I think he brings a lot, especially defensively, but because there's obviously a lot more to basketball than scoring. But
Yeah.
for KU fans that are hating on KJ, telling him to get rid of him from the starting lineup, I just have one simple question: like, where else are they going to go? Because there isn't much, there isn't really another guy to put in at that four spot.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're kind of on the same page in this situation. I don't know where they would go. My assumption would be it would be Dewan, Zeke, AJ, Rylan, and then Hunter, which could be fun. I think that could be very fun. And I think honestly that could be a lineup that we see quite a bit towards the end of the game, end of the year. Um, if AJ Store can find a way to get going. But kind of like you said, I think he provides a lot of things on the court that isn't scoring. I think he's a great leader. Um, and I think he hustles. I think he's really a hustle player, blue collar player. I feel like he's a player that you almost need to be in the starting lineup. And it's funny because every Kansas fan, every fan on college basketball is calling for his throat to be or calling for his name, his saying get out of the starting lineup. Like, what is he doing playing for our team? It's funny when you listen to opposing coaches talk about him because in an opposing coach's eye, he is their most lethal player. And as crazy as that might sound, Tom Izzo said it, Hubert Davis has said it, Calvin Sampson's made comments on it. He is the player that can genuinely kill you. Is KJ Adams. He was compared to Draymond Green in the press conference against Michigan State. Like, if that doesn't just tell you right there how highly big time coaches think of KJ Adams, then I don't know. I don't know what does.
Yeah, and obviously, I'm sure as you know, Draymond Green is a guy people like to get on too.
You wanted to have
But
him on your team. You don't want to play against him.
exactly, I always say Draymond Green will make an amazing coach one day if he
Oh
could
yeah,
keeps himself out of trouble. But I like KJ, and another thing with KJ, it really turns back to the fan base, and I would say obviously you love having an amazing fan base as KU does,
yeah.
but the one negative that comes with an amazing fan base is, and I come from a Boston background, so I know all about it, is
You're
maybe a
very
little
aware.
bit of a toxic fan base, and especially with KU
A greedy fan base.
exactly, and especially with KU basketball, where last season they were a 4 seed, knocked out in the second round, and that was a bad season. Where a lot of programs love it, and but I just think and I don't think he looked bad against Michigan State, and like I always obviously Bill Self, you know as much as great as he is, take that with a grain of salt, just because it's his player. He's never going to publicly shame him,
He
I
will
guess,
never. He will never do that. He'll do a lot of
but
things. He won't do that.
then that's when you have to go, like you said, to other coaches. Go to a guy, and I mean, if you're a college basketball fan, you know how much Tom Izzo's done for the sport and how legendary he is in the sport. If Tom Izzo likes a guy, I'd say he's probably pretty dang good. So, that's where you have to go maybe with an unbiased take because Bill Self, regardless of the situation, will never say KJ shouldn't be out there because that's not what any coach would ever do, or at
Yeah.
least any good coach. But Tom Izzo, the fact he gets props from Tom Izzo, Kelvin Sampson, some of the best in our sport. It just shows you the leader he is, the player he is, and the fact, regardless of what the burners on Twitter say, he deserves to be on the floor.
I really do believe if KJ Adams entered the transfer portal, he would be one of the more highly highly touted guys in the portal, one of the guys that your coach would love to have on your team. So I think it's understandable. You want somebody there who spaces the floor, who provides a little more offense. But in reality, I mean, he had 14 points in the first half against UNC. Like I get it. Most of those buckets were at the basket, but like there are games where he provides offense. So it's kind of like, yes, he had a bad game. So did everyone else on the floor. I mean, this KU team shot abysmal. Like there was a point at the under eight timeout, it was 14-14 at the under eight media timeout.
On really bad shooting too.
On it was like both teams were shooting like under 25%. So like this is not something to feel scared about, feel bad about. Like Kansas is gonna figure it out. There's no way possibly we can shoot worse than how we shot against Michigan State. That was the lowest field goal percentage all season. Not the lowest 3-point percentage because Rylan Griffin made a shot in it at the end that kind of rose that up a little bit. But overall, Hunter Dickinson had a game. Dwan Harris, I guess he had 11 points. Zeke Mayo couldn't score to save his life. I think he only had 6, but he had 10 rebounds, 7 assists, something you
Because he just
like.
did everything else too, though, that night.
But that's the thing. That's what you got to do when shots aren't falling. You got to find a way to make an impact. And Zeke Mayo did that. Grabbed rebounds, passed the ball. I mean, you would like to see a little more out of KJ. I don't think he grabbed very many assists, but again, everyone has bad games.
There weren't a lot of shots falling in his defense.
No, no, there weren't. No, there weren't. Overall, though, do you think this kind of scares you? I don't think this is a performance from the number one team in the country. I'm not going to get too worked up about it quite yet, but are you a little nervous knowing that Hunter Dickinson's KU's best player and he might not have a Robin this year?
Um, I don't know. I don't know if I'd get nervous yet. I mean, it's still very early. In Michigan State, obviously, they're not the Michigan State we've seen in the past.
Hmm.
And that's no, discredit to them now. It's just we've seen some really good Michigan State teams.
Yeah.
And so they've kind of, I don't want to say they've fallen off, but it's just not the same team.
No, it's
And
not.
it's, I think as great as he is, Tom Izzo might be towards the end. It's a lot, you see a lot of those old school coaches
No,
kind of,
this could be the last matchup between Izzo and Self.
yeah. And I was just saying, you see a lot of old school coaches that kind of, I don't want to say get sick of the new era, but, aren't huge fans of the NIL. I think that's part of the reason probably Tony Bennett left Virginia. But,
Yeah.
and I think Bill Self secretly loves it. I think he loves recruiting. I think he likes,
I think he loves it because he can afford it.
yeah.
I mean, KU, whether you want to admit it or not, has had allegations in the past of doing this when it wasn't legal. So I feel like Bill Self might be better at it than some of the other coaches, quite frankly.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think I would get nervous just yet. It's still early. And I would say between like the first week of the season and I'd say even up until like the week after finals week, like that whole week is when, a lot of tomfoolery happens. I was just watching a game last night. Washington, totally off, course, but Washington was losing at halftime to Seattle Pacific, who was an 0-3 Division three team by double digits, might I add. So that's
Uh,
just the type of stuff we see. They ended up winning by like 15. But we just see that stuff this early in the season because, especially now with the transfer portal and
uh,
NIL, there's so much movement and there's so many new faces and new schemes and new coaches everywhere. And we've seen this all the time, like because it's a weird time. I mean, these kids are college students too, right?
yeah.
Some of these, they're all 19, 20 years old. So they go through, we're towards the end, as we know, we're towards the end of the semester. And a lot of people will say they don't go to class, but I mean, I see players in class. They go to class.
I
So
can confirm KU basketball does go to class. They don't get pretty privilege,
yeah,
like some would say.
I saw Florida in class this morning, but whatever. And so it's just I always say like I've been saying it for years, and everyone has. It's just like especially wait till the Christmas time is crazy because you
Yeah.
have guys flying all over the country. You have Christmas break, going home, then you come back. You have one practice. No one's in the arenas. Finals weeks. It's just
No.
all like I don't worry really until conference play, just because
Yeah.
there's so much going on and although these guys seem like professionals, they're not. Like they're 19-year or 20-year-old kids, so they're people, and
Yeah.
stuff happens. But I wouldn't worry yet about KU. Obviously, you don't want them to play and shoot as
Nah.
poorly as they did
Yeah.
every night. But I think they'll be the fact they were able to win against still, like you said, not the same Michigan State, but still Michigan State. The fact they were to win, by 8 points, it's not. It's I think they covered the spread. So
Yeah, they did.
that's what
They still covered the spread.
great teams cover. So there you go.
Great teams cover. There's a quote I want to kind of read from Bill Self actually in this game. It was impressive because it's true. Really is true. He started off the press conference by saying this. He said, in order to win a lot of games, like he did, congratulations to Bill Self becoming the winningest coach in KU history. He said, in order to win a lot of games, you got to win the games you're supposed to win. And you have to win the games where you play great, and you have to win the games where you play great. But you also somehow have to figure out a way to win games when you're not your best. And we weren't, but neither were they. And that's a prime example of that game. Neither team was really good, but Kansas finds a way. They seemed to do that against North Carolina. They did it again on Tuesday. That's just KU basketball. Bill Self becomes the winningest coach in KU history, and the Kansas Jayhawks move to 3-0 on the young season. KU basketball will be back in action on Saturday.
Yep, Saturday.
Saturday in a mid-afternoon game. I think it's 5 p.m. to take on Oakland at Allen Fieldhouse. Any last comments, James?
Yeah, I think you said it. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of like style points or moral victories. You either win or you don't. And
That's my thing.
every coach in America will tell you that. And regardless of what the burners on Twitter have to say about KJ, Hunter, whoever, Kansas won on Tuesday and they're 3-0, and that's all that really matters.
I mean, my dad always said it. My dad coached high school soccer, and it was one of those things where he would say, "Hey, I would rather win than lose."
Exactly.
Sometimes all you have to do is get the W. James, I appreciate you taking the time to join me today.
Of course.
Uh,
Thank you, Jack.
I always have a fun time filming these with you, so I'm definitely gonna have you on again soon. But I appreciate you taking the time.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Jack.
Alrighty, guys, that is all we have. The Kansas Jayhawks get a 77-69 win over the Michigan State Spartans to move to 3-0 on the season. And we will see you guys later.